Hello, everyone. We'll wait a little longer to give the other ones to join, and then we'll start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we can wait a little bit more.
Okay, let's start it. Yeah. Okay, so today's topic it's about mood and lighting. How the lighting will affect the mood, obviously, is very important aspect of the composition, because what we're seeing or what is being captured, it's related with reflected picture we've seen to through the lens. What does that mean? All the environment we see around us as a live persons, it is captured and seen through this paradigm of reflected image. So the light, it's lighting some volumes or objects around us, and we see what is reflected back to us. The same thing it happens with the cameras as well. Even either way, analog or digital, the lens it's projecting on the surface of the uh, analog or the digital surface that projected images, and it's been exposed digitally or analog. Now, all these ratios we are seeing around us, and the meaning of those relation, let's say if it's a very bright environment, we start seeing very well contrast, because the eye, it's adjusting the intensity of what is getting through the iris, and therefore we, let's say, concentrate more on the middle part of the contrast, and not seeing too well the dark, the toe part of the densities or the highlights and the specular highlights, which are on the higher part of the dynamic range spectrum, sort of saying. That means when we, as a human being, we have kind of the same possibilities to reduce the intensity of the light getting through the lens, which is the our crystalline, I think it's called the same, crystal whatever eye, and the iris, the pupil, it's closing or opening as we getting to a bright day or surrounded by a very high level of intensities, or getting into the dark room and wait for the eye to adjust this intensity. The contrast and the lighting atmosphere we want to, let's say, make it in a picture or in the video we shoot, it's as I told you, it's depending on how the light it is placed, or how the relations between character or the scene we're shooting it is with the camera position. So talking about characters, that we can make a picture of a character which is flat on, like I'm right now here, looking straight to camera, like straight on the lens. I can be on the 3/4, like this, looking that way, yeah, which is, this is a 3/4 position. I can be profile and over the shoulder, looking the other way around. So those are the main position for, let's say, how the camera position will interfere with what we can see from the character. He also can be shot from a low angle, neutral, like now, or high angle from above. And all those decisions will affect how the scene or the relations between the character and the background, or midground, foreground, midground, background, will be shown in the composition. Therefore, the light itself and how the light is shown, or how the direction of the light it's used in the composition, it also can enhance some important areas or things which we want to emphasize in that composition, like certain elements, some specific compositional parts, or the action of the characters and or the actors, whatever, on the certain spots in within that composition. We already talked about the importance of the quality, direction, intensity, and the color of the light source, and that was the topic on Monday. And of course, getting further on, we will talk today about the mood and lighting. So how the specific key light, let's say it, will change the feeling of the frame and the mood of and the atmosphere of that composition, either if it's film or photography. Okay. I hope you've seen the video. It's not such a long one, but I will try to show you some things related with contrasts. I will see if it's working this way or not. I'm trying to make it full screen. Not sure if you still see it, or you still see it. Maybe not. I will just try to make it bigger from here. So, of course, all these technical issues or references, we had it in a composition, either it's a photograph or a movie. It's related with the contrast, and the contrast, it's shown on this logarithmic scale, which works both in analog or digital. This is a presentation from Kodak, the film manufacturer, who tries to explain how this dynamic range of the film, nowadays the digital as well, can be stretched or just compressed to a short scale, like a very low contrast scene, or on the very extended scale with very high contrast, with deeper blacks and very bright whites. Yeah, as already mentioned, this Ansel Adams zone, it was set a long time ago, at the beginning of the 20th century, and also tells a lot of things about how the tonal contrast between total black and a pure white, it's spread on this 10 stops latitude, which usually we have it on various devices like photo cameras or video cameras. Yeah, this is how this kind of latitude is expressed or and shown on this kind of scale. And of course, to be more efficient, we can see how different parts of the frame being lit in the backlit situation, like it's in this example here, will show or emphasize different densities and brightnesses around the composition. Of course, based on this picture here, we can make any adjustments we wish nowadays, because we can get and influence the contrast, overall contrast, the hue, saturation, and so on and so forth, making windows or parts of this composition can be enhanced or just reduced as a intensity, just place a small mask here, and that can be easily done by reducing or enhancing it. Also, changing the color is very easily done here. There is a lot of examples of how the dynamic range and the tonal representation of densities and brightnesses are shown in the movies, like Catch Me If You Can. That's the example here. But of course, it's not that important. It is important to understand how and why some of those movies are looking in a specific way because of the lighting effect and the light itself, how we change the mood of the scene from a very, let's say, mixed scene like this one, or also very contrast or very low contrast scene, like I've showed you here. So getting now to the the video, I've explained the mood and lighting. Another important thing when we decide to make a composition which can get into it a lot of density and brightnesses, like very wide tonal reproductions. That means that scene, it has a lot of contrast, and the contrast is one of the important details when we talk about how we can enhance or underline some of the situations and the things we want to shoot or photograph. I will show you now some photographs. Let me just select them. Which shows how the mood can be influenced by changing the contrast. I think I already showed you a video, but now I'm going to show you some pictures from the same. Are you still seeing it or not? Maybe like that is better. Okay. So the environment we shot on, it's about how the different moments and contrasts can be shown on different environment or medium. I showed you Monday, I think, the parts of this movie shot on a Sony camera mirrorless Alpha 6600, and those are the picture we captured after all. So, of course, the mood of the scene, we think about, okay, we can think like it's a daytime interior, and we try to emulate how the light will enter to this room as intensity, direction, and quality. There is, of course, there's some moments in this lighting situation which we decided to change the reality and the brightness, and that's changed the whole contrast overall. So here we had an extra light which was shot through this window here on this cabinet, and this is without it, and this is without another light which is on exterior. This is without another light which is an interior, and this is back with the lights like they were before. So the differences between this and this It's 1, 2, 3 lights which have been shut off. So the one which was on this part of the cabinet here, the ambient light inside the room, which is this, and the skylight, which affects the curtain and the density of interior. And you can see that here on the curtain. And of course, the main effect, which is the light here on this part of the furniture. As a overall feeling, of course, we can see how the exposure as well affects that feeling of daytime or afternoon or nighttime into soundstage. This is a soundstage, and this is a set, a film set, which we use here in at the film school. And of course, we try to emulate as close as we can the atmosphere and the moods we want to produce on several or the specific situations. This, comparing with the other one, it's a very contrast situation, as you can see it, and that is before because the environment and the ambient light, which usually brighten up the dark areas, is missing. Yeah, of course, that's one of the main differences. And of course, not only that, but the light effect on the furniture on the back wall, the left wall here. Well, now regarding the video I've recorded for this lighting ratio and mood and contrast, if you saw it, seen on the specific moments, some captures, some photographs of the model, which is being shot on different exposure values. What does that mean? The exposure values can also influence how we see, perceive, or record the environment we want to shoot on. So if the character, it's a Caucasian skin tone type actress or actor or actresses, that value, it's read somewhere over the middle range of the midtones. Of course, if it's an African American, that skin tone is going to be lower on that range. Changing the exposure can and for sure will affect this density, because the whole range of the brightness, density, and dark areas will be shifted up or down in relations with the exposure. So when we do overexpose some photographs or video, of course, some of the range of the brightnesses, which are usually in the frame, in the composition, they will be clipped, which means that part of information is going to be missing in the composition. And sometimes we don't want to do that because it's not so nice to have clipped whites or crushed blacks. I will get soon to this definition. So when we overexpose, of course, we assume some of those informations in the highlights is going to be destroyed or clipped. It's no way to recover it in the post-production, which means we have to be very aware of how we wish to do that, because otherwise uh, uh, the look of the picture is gonna be affected. Of course, there's some specific situations where we want to do a slightly overexposed composition, and some of them they are on the other way, on the opposite. We want to do a kind of moody atmosphere by underexposing a bit. So which means we're closing down the stop, not open up half or one stop to brighten up or underexposed. And of course, the position of the lights according with the character position, or the ratio between key light and the fill light, will also establish that kind of mood within which we try to express something different than in the real time moments. Therefore, sometimes we use very hard lights and very defined shadows to, let's say, do a very expressive photograph, or shoot an interesting scene, which can be a part of a noir movie, or I don't know, a horror movie or whatever. There are a lot of situations which we have to choose as the mood related with the scene we want to shoot, as the atmosphere, and how those things they're gonna be shown on the screen. In this video, which is very short, hopefully, I explained some. I will go now just on the specific parts of it. Just to wait a second, I'm not sure it's gonna work direct. Just to show you how the exposure will affect the environment we shoot on. So more or less, this will be kind of a correct exposure for skin tone. Yeah. So ignore that whiteness of the model. We'll try to see it like it's a real skin tone. Of course, it's not a skin tone, but for the sake of the demonstration, we'll think it will be like that. The question, I mean, the problem which I will raise it now, it's the mood based on the intensity of the key light and the fill light. Key light, let's say it's the light is coming from his left, and the fill light is the one which is modeling the right side. We can see a little shadow of his nose here, which is both left and right, which means we see the direction of the key light and then the fill light. As you can see it here, the intensities are very closed. They are almost equal, which as a mood approach doesn't say anything about how we want to do this, let's say, environment, or how to express it, unless we want to see it like a different relation between the character and the background. So as a relevance of the contrast, both of those pictures have the same contrast. The difference between them is just the how the exposure will affect the feeling of the density and space we've shot on. Yeah, and this is done only by the exposure. It's this one and this one. Of course, most of you will see will say, well, it's too much of a difference between this and this, and this is somewhere here. No, here. Because of course it is a big difference, but it's made only by the exposure, not anything else. So when we want to make a or try to build a different meaning or feeling of the environment we shoot on, we have to change or at least think of how we can do that through the tools we have it on the camera and the tools we have it in front of the camera, the lights. And those lights are, of course, very, very versatile. And I already showed you my LED light here, which can be changed from warm light to daylight in a second. You can change the hue or the intensity and the saturation of the light just by turning a knob. But this is not the discussion now. It's just about how we decide to make a lighting contrast, which is very low or very small one, like in the example I just showed you, and how this small contrast will do and say a different story, and it's going to have a different meaning when we overexpose it. If we expose it properly, like the first photograph, it doesn't say anything more than there's a very good picture which is well exposed, and that's it. After all, you're not it's not a memorable photograph which will let's say interest or at least say something about the character or the environment just by changing the exposure time and the values of the lights and the darkness in this composition. The other example, which I think is very close to the one I just showed you, it's let me just find out which is it. Yeah, this one, it's even more extreme, let's say it. When I'm saying extreme, it's not about how the environment is shown, is just how we select the parts which interest us in the composition. So if you remember the one before was a little wider, and therefore the feeling of that's overexposure, it wasn't that obvious because we had some dark areas in the composition, and those dark areas will affect the feeling we will have related with the brightnesses and the overexposure or the parts which are overexposed in the composition. And this is, sorry, this is the other example, which of course it looks totally different because those surfaces and the densities are missing in the frame, and it looks in a way more pleasant without those densities in the composition. Again, this is as a lighting ratio. It's one very even lighting ratio between key light and the fill light, which I wouldn't say it's a wrong approach. Sometimes we want to do those kind of very even and low contrast portrait lighting with two lights, not with a single light. And sometimes the model itself, it's let's say dressed in a certain way. We want to emphasize this. Let's say it's a bride, and the bride, of course, it's wearing a white gown, and the dress, it has to be, let's say, a little bit overexposed to do more of those feeling of happiness and whatever different things we want to express in the composition or in a picture. I will get a little further on when the lighting ratio is changed by simply changing the ratio between them and the intensity, of course. So we're more or less on the same situation here. I just added a little backlight, which is this light here on, which is kind of the edgy light for the model. And I just turned off the key light, or one of the lights, which might be a key light. Yeah, so now, because we have only two lights involved in this lighting scheme, we can see how the relation between different direction and quality of lights. The backlight, it's a very hard light, and frontal light, which it's supposed to be a fill light till now, is a little softer. It's not kind of the same softness like the softbox we have it here on the left, but a different quality. Different quality means as a white balance, it's a little more cooler, but that's not a problem in this discussion. But adding or changing the general mood of the character, it can be done by just adding some light effects or very specific and punctual lights on the character's face, like this example here, which can get us to the photograph itself. We'll get right now on that situation, which on let's say it shows, of course, totally different than on the video we just see it. Yeah, because the balance and the intensities of the lights are of course rendered by a video camera, which is the camera on which the videos have been shot, and this is the photo camera, which of course has different particularities, and the sensor, it's a good one, not such a creepy or a shitty one in the video cameras I've used. Of course, the difference is huge if you look at the model itself and how the highlights and the shadows are shown here, comparing with what we've seen here. Yeah, this is as a approach to a moody lighting style. It's one of the approaches which has been used throughout the years on the cinema history and also photography in noir movies, policier, or even horror. Because of course, when we light too much the scene, which it has to be scary or mysterious, the scene itself, it's just losing that feeling of mystery, and it doesn't mean any frightening for anyone being overlit or evenly lit as well. The next in line is just changing the expression of the same character, let's say, by underexpose it. The underexpose it, I just show you here somewhere. So that's one position, and this is the second one. As you can see it's very different feeling. Of course, all the areas being exposed in the frame, they're more shadowed, and the densities which are already on the part which just shadowed before and exposed it properly, they're like looking differently than this one here. And this is made only by changing the exposure and just bring all those brightnesses and midtones lower to the darker part. So on the, let's say, different approach, it's getting more mysterious or a different look on sometimes on the things which are looking different on different exposure situations, like this one and this one. And this one is here somewhere, sorry. Yeah, and the differences between those is just a slightly underexposed situation here. So as a general norm, when we try to, let's say, make a composition which it's as a approach or how we want to make it, it's a high key or a low key scene. Those are the two approaches on how to get to the high key situation or low key situation. First, the setup, the lighting setup, it's very different. It is, of course, involving not only one light or one direction, it's also involving different kind of quality of light, more hard light versus soft light, and not that frontal way of lighting it on the highlight the high key situation, comparing with the low key situation where the lights are very differently shown, or they're very cut on the face and not so broad on direction and intensity. Okay. If you have any question, feel free to just ask. Right. I think I just showed you that before, but let me explain that again for why when we try to change the sensitivity of the camera, that will affect the property of the camera itself. And strange, it was over here. Okay. So on the digital technology, of course, the sensor has a very much importance on how the things we shot they are shown in the final picture. And we always talk about native exposure index, which is usually 800 on digital cameras. This exposure index can be extended to different values or changed up and down. Yeah. The problem, and this is only for video cameras, when we change the exposure index. When we change the exposure index, will affect how the highlights and the shadows will gonna be processed, because not only on the when we underexpose or overexpose, we let's say change how the camera it's rendering those two specific areas, the dark parts and the whites and highlights. But just changing the exposure index will also affect this. When we getting higher on the exposure index, so we need to boost a little bit the sensitivity of the camera, will bring in the picture a little more noise and will affect how the parts we have seen in the shadows, it's squashed, and the parts of the highlights, it's more extended. It's very strange when we think about, okay, we'll try to getting on higher exposure index, changing the sensitivity of the camera, because we need more sensitivity to see a little more and better in the shadows. But the response of the camera is totally different, and it's just changing that logic, which we'll think about it, and it's saying, okay, when we increase the sensitivity of the camera and the exposure index is getting higher, we actually crush the blacks and extend the let's say the exposure index and the how the highlights were going to be processed. On the other way, when we change the exposure index and we're going slower and lower than the base one, which is, let's say, 1250 on that's the Sony f55 or Sony f5. Those two cameras has a different exposure index as a base ISO. And when we change this, and let's say we want to shoot in bright sunlight, and we need to lower this exposure index to 320, this will affect how the camera will process these specific parts. Will widen up a bit the parts which are very usually they're very generous in the base ISO, like 8 stops in the blacks, I mean midtones and blacks, and 6 stops in the bright areas and highlights, and that area goes even higher, extended to 10 stops, getting from the highlights and specular highlights area, which shrink it to 4 stops. So it's not any time the idea to change the ISO of the camera just because we expected to see better or differently in the shadows or in the highlights. It's just a matter of how the camera will interfere with this densities and brightness, and in the final picture or image, we deal with more noise or less noise in according with what kind of changing the ISO or sensitivity, the exposure index we choose. Okay, 10-minute break for a coffee. See you at 4 o'clock sharp. Cheers. Hello again. Okay. So the difference between the quality of the light is, of course, when we shoot a portrait and we want to make a photograph with a flash, the camera flash, and that flash, it's of course from the camera itself. The picture itself, it doesn't look so appealing, of course, because the lights coming from the camera on the same direction with the lens, it's a very flat light. And when we try to let's say judge the environment we do this photograph and the portrait we want to shoot, we try to make it a little bit different than just shoot it with a flashlight. Of course, the flashlight as a quality, it's a very hard light. It's not a soft light. Sometimes we can add some accessories on the flashlight and make a little soft box it or a little softer. But again, if the flashlight is still on the camera, the light itself is very flat because it's coming very frontal from the camera direction. Changing that angle will emphasize a bit the, let's say, the volumetry of and the tridimensionality of the portrait, and sometimes will emphasize some parts of the composition. So when the portrait we try to shoot, it's a frontal one, like I'm here, and the light, it's very straight on. It's not such a flattering light for a portrait, and sometimes it's more interesting and better for the portrait to change at least one of the parameter of the light, the quality. I mean, doing instead of hard light, make it a little softer, and also the direction of it. So when we try to do that, and I've showed you last time, and we do that the deal with my LED light here, but we can do that again. It's also the distance which we have from the light to the character, and that will change the feeling of softness. Because what is important when we want to show or try to make a soft light out of the light source, the most important thing is the surface of that light, and also the distance from the subject to the light. I will show you why. I will make a little more darkness here, and let's do this. So, as an example of using a single light source and making a different, let's say, approach or relevance of how we think of, I think this camera is a little more dirty. It does. Make it a little more. Okay, hope it's better. So when we think about, okay, that's a kind of, let's do this. I'm getting that light out of the side by blocking it with my body, which means I'm in very backlight situation. Yeah, you can see on my hand, you can see on my rim here, and it's called also rim light. When I'm getting here, and let's do this here, I have a very backlit situation as well. I'm just covering the flare from the light, and all the environment here, it's made only from this one light situation. Yeah, when I'm getting to frontal, of course, you see the lights in my lenses here. I can just take it out. It's not such a nice and flattering light for me. I'm not a very handsome guy, but also the intensity of this light and the proximity of the subject to the light will do a different feeling of softness. Yeah. So this is a very soft light here, and the same light getting further away from it is going to be very harsh and different. You see the shadows of my glasses here, the frame of the glasses are very defined here because I'm very, let's say, far away from that light. I'm now at, let's say, 4 meters away from it, which is make it out of this soft light a very harsh light. You see how those shadows, the frames are now very soft. You see, they're very different than in the other situations, which I was very far away from it. So as I explained to you last time, it's not enough to have a soft light as a light with a softbox like this one here. It's also important to think about how much of that intensity and surface will affect the the feeling of the light itself. So it's of course a matter of how we choose to make this approach. Of course, when we want to have a very soft light situation, we need to use a big surface softbox close to the subject. Therefore, being that close to the subject, all the shadows are very soft and pleasant for, let's say, a portrait, even if it's an actress or an actor. Now, getting to that video, which further on explain how the quality of light will change this approach on how the soft light or hard light will show differently the contrast. I will get back to the video and show you how changing a bit the relevance of the light itself from what it was before, somewhere here, to here. Yeah, just changing a bit the areas we lighted. We change, of course, the mood of the portrait itself, and then further on, changing also the how the exposure will show this environment. It is a bit more dramatically, let's say it, than before, just by adjusting the exposure, getting a little lower or underexposed to this situation. So if you look at if you try to look it back at the video with this themes I just told you, you should be more aware of those approaches and let's say how we can change the mood of the scene, sometimes just by underexpose it, and sometimes just changing the direction of the light, and how those things are seen in the frame. Beside those two approaches, like high key and the low key scene and lighting scheme, we also have the famous day for night scene, which has been usually shot on black and white movies, but sometimes in the color movies. It's kind of approach which nowadays it's obsolete, because it is the feeling of that reality is not nighttime, but it's shot in midday with the sun backlighting the scene we shot it. The problem is with this day for night scenes, it is we don't need to see, or it's let's say forbidden to see sky in the frame, because the sky is very bright during the day, and it not sell that feeling of nighttime shot in the daytime, as the term is saying, day for night. Because when we see the sky, of course, it's obviously it's a daytime, it's nighttime. Otherwise, the whole concept of shooting daytime for nighttime, the day for night, it's adjusting the contrast and how the scene is lit, mainly backlit, and underexpose it sometimes by T-stops. So it's a very intense underexposing, and that underexposing as well with the approach on light direction and the quality of the light and so on and so forth, will give that nighttime impression either in black and white or color. Of course, in color, sometimes it's an extra care to be aware of. It's how the blueness of the night it's shown, and of course there've been some filters to be used in the day for night scene, which are very dark blue cyan filters, which are usually used for this approach. For sure, you have seen many of those situations, but I mean the day for night scenes. But right now, I don't have any specific scenes in the mind. But I'm sure even in all the famous TV series like the HBO, what do you call Game of Thrones. I think even in the Game of Thrones, there are some scenes which they've been shot day for night. So the thing is still used and still working, just that bluish cyanish tint and a little bit underexposing will make that feeling of nighttime during daytime. And you don't need to spend the whole night shooting a scene. We just have to be more careful how to plan the whole shooting during the day and make that same feeling of shooting during the nighttime. And it's called day for night. Okay, what else? All getting back to this videos, which I think I've shot also some of those yesterday, which involves different, it's a different setup, and it's a setup of how we can change the feeling of the areas and the mood just by changing the proximity of the light to the window. It's a kind of very specific approach. I will try to explain.
Yeah.
Let me just share it first, and then I will explain. Okay. So that's, as you notice, it's the same space we've shot on the other scenes as well. The mood now it's different because we put another lamp here, and the space itself is going to be shown differently in different contrast ratio, and I will show you that again. So here it's a smaller light placed closer to the window, which in a real life will do. I will show you what. We'll do this light effect on the floor and on the walls, and the texture of it and the shadows are not that sharp. You'll see later on when we change the. And in this situation, we, let's say, engage two different types of lighting. One which is only daytime approach inside a room in that same studio we have it here, and another one is just a light which is in frame, and we add an extra light to emphasize that kind of interaction and intensity. So this intensity, this lamp intensity, couldn't cover this effect on the guy, and this light was just added for himself. I will get back to the scenes, and I will choose a different one with a different light. Wait a second. This one. So it's kind of the same environment, only done with different approach. The light was moved far away from the window, and as you can see it here, it's a different texture on the floor, and the shadows are more defined on the wall here. Yeah, the shadows from the curtain itself. That's why, because the light itself was further away from the window, and the distance I just explained to you about works in that kind of projecting, let's say, the shadows of the object we shine through on this back wall here. And also the intensity and the feeling of this environment, it's kind of different because we didn't see that much of the floor, the light effect on the floor, which gets, let's say, and explains how we can feel this environment being a bit moodier than the one before. And I will get back to the other one to see what I'm talking about. And then I will show you the picture as well. The pictures are more explainable and so getting back to the first one. Just turn off the sound. So all of a sudden, all the interior looks brighter because of that effect being a little bit more broader. We'll see it in on the floor here, on the floor there, and a little more bigger in on the furniture here. So the light effect, it's more wider in this interior just because the light is closer to the window. Otherwise, all the intensities in the room have been measured and kept on the same level as before. I'll show now the other one again. When we just change the position of the light, all the rest have been kept the same. So as an approach and the overall feeling, of course, the surfaces and the volumes we light in a room will make that feeling, or at least will express that feeling of being moodier or brighter because of the environment and ambient light we added or involved in this scene. Just show you some pictures from the same scene with and without the ambient light. So I told you about. So this is with ambient light, and this is without the ambient light. Yeah. Of course, it does look, being also black and white, looks totally different, but the differences between this one and this one, it's just the ambient light which is shown inside, and of course the feeling of how the environment it's looking when we change that contrast ratio in the shot. Again, the same thing, just his position was different, and then without the ambient light at all, with half of the ambient light here. As you can see, the floor is not that bright now, like in this here. And of course, the light effect is different than here. And the light effect is more broader, and the ambient light, it's at a half of the intensity of the one before. Yeah. So only the feeling of how the things are felt here It's only about how the different ratios in the frame are placed and decided. So here, the ambient light from what is coming from the window, it's at a half intensity, as this is without it, this is half intensity here, and this is full intensity. Okay. What else? I can also show you that that video, which I think you might have the changing the atmosphere through the lens. No. This one, I think we've seen it. Yes. Let's look at the last one. So this is more or less saying it's the brightest one as the reference between ambient and the light effect, the key light and its intensity on the guy and on the inside, let's say, apartment, and that relation will and the feeling of it will be different on different environment and contrast specificities in here. And here, I think we just turn off some, or not, we didn't. I thought we turned off some lights, but we didn't turn off any lights. Anyway, okay. All right. So as a main approach on mood and how the feel of that environment it's made for the viewer or for the spectator in the cinema hall, the cinema theater, or on the television, we have to have in mind this, let's say, relation between those four factors of the light, the direction, the quality, the intensity, and the color temperature. So the quality, of course, is very important because it's changing the structure of the shadow, and having a strong shadow, a mixed shadow, let's say, and very soft shadow will also affect or influence the tridimensionality of the volumes which we are seeing in the frame. Being or relating or just on hard light is not, let's say, easy, because using hard light, it's sometimes very complicated to get, let's say, an interesting portrait lighting using only hard lights. And the differences between hard lights and soft light, it's of course, first, using a soft light, you can just use only a softbox, and that's it. You don't need to add any additional lights on the portrait, even if you want to add a backlight or an edge light or whatever, something which emphasize or underline the light effect of the softbox. But changing that with only hard light situation with hard light projectors or lights, it's gonna make a little bit difficult to achieve something interesting, let's say. Well, anyway, you need a lot of accessories like barn doors and flags and whatever. There's different accessories for when you use a softbox and when you use hard light as an approach with how that light effect or intensities will be shown on the final product. Usually when we talk about the commercial photographs and how the product photographs or portrait lighting it's approaching, all or the main majority of the photographers are using soft boxes or soft environments to shoot let's say products like, I don't know, glasses, cups, and so on and so forth. And when we approach that kind of thing, we'll have to have in mind the structure of the object we shoot. And that means if it's an object that has transparencies or high reflexivity, like, I don't know, glasses, cups, and silveries, we have to have in mind a very easy thing, which says, being a reflexive surface, we're going to see that light which we're going to use it reflected in that surface. And I'll try to find some examples of glasses. Wait a second. To see how we approach, let's say, studio photography using the positive or negative space, the transparencies or the density of the of course, it's sometimes hard to find it. Usually when we try to find it, it's impossible to find it. But if I'm not finding it out in a minute, I will just drop it. No, there's no any chance to find it. Anyway, maybe I'll find it for the next class. I will search more in depth. Anyway, so when we shoot, of course, things which are transparent, we have to have in mind what's the background when we do that, because the background itself can be dark or bright. And when we overlay this bright background with something which is transparent, of course, that intensity and brightness will affect the transparencies of the glass itself. If it's a transparent glass, of course, it's gonna affect it more than usual. If it's a color or let's say not so transparent, more like translucent light, translucent glass, will make, of course, a different. Will show different texture or densities on the glass itself. But of course, that's a thing you should try by yourself when you have at least one light with softbox or without it, and see what's the difference when you try to light a shiny surface like a glass or more glasses on the white background and on the dark background, and see what's the meaning of lighting with a hard source or with a softbox. And that's a very different approach, because the surface itself, like I've been told you several times, it becomes the surface which is going to be shown reflected to from the glass or from the shiny objects we're trying to shoot or to show in the composition. Okay. The main difference between the spaces I showed you in those videos are from the approach first, and secondly for the direction and how this approach regarding the contrast, it is treated differently. So the environment now, the one I will show now, it's again the same soundstage, but it's on a different direction, and it's shot without any curtain on the window. So as an approach, it's let's say very hard light and soft light altogether. Remember the light effect on this furniture here is still there. We see one light reflected here. So that's how we wanted to make it. And of course, the contrast, we've seen it in the white shot. It's replicated here. If you remember I will show you the white shot again. So this is as you can see it, it's same environment without any curtain on the window, and the approach is similar with the one we had it next day with the curtain on. The only difference is, of course, the lights we used here and how from four lighting scheme we get back to only two lights. Yeah. So in this environment, as you see it here, we think we have to shoot different moods, and these moods are of course very much dependent on the contrast and the lighting ratio between the lights. We'll use it in this composition. Yeah. Now we have, let's say, just one direction, and it's the lights which are coming through the window. Here we have a fill light also involved, and here we have an extra interior light which brings that level of darkness a little higher. And now getting to the over-the-shoulder shot, which I already showed you before. That over-the-shoulder will see. Wait a second. It's not. It's not. Over the shoulder is this one. Do, 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 do. So this is without changing any of the lights position on uh, the setup we had it before, but the next one is with different approach as changing the atmosphere with the lights we involved and used in the frame. So we started as very complicated with those windows here. Sorry. So we started on very moody atmosphere, just one light, and then we make it even more moodier, and this was only by underexposing the whole thing. Of course, the feeling it's a totally different atmosphere than before, only by changing the exposure and relation in between the lights we've seen here. It might be a little more too abstract for you, but believe me, when we do these kind of exercises, we're trying to emphasize how the different moods and atmospheres are approached by different direction, intensity, and ratios. And the ratio actually makes that mood. The ratio, if you go on a low-key ratio, of course, you need to have a wide range of contrast. If you go on a high key, you have to get a specific and more low contrast situation. As well, when you go and overexpose or underexpose, of course, that decision, it has to be very justified, because otherwise we just crush the blacks or clip the whites, and that's not such a nice thing to do on either if it's a video or a photograph. On both situation is not such a nice approach. So, of course, I'm still thrilled and expecting what we decided to make it as homework. It's not such a rush with it, and sometimes you can try to make it even with a smartphone. Therefore, using a smartphone, it doesn't give you that freedom to adjust the t-stop or change the exposure time or the base ISO, which of course on any photo camera or digital, let's say, prosumer camera, we can do it, and the effect and the results are very different, and of course specifically different on each situation. So I hope to see some of the exercises sooner and discuss about them, even if we just discuss on emails. And that will be for today. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I think. Yeah. Thank you very much, and look forward to see you tomorrow, and then Friday as well, and then whatever, just keep in touch, and have a nice afternoon. You're really welcome. See you. Bye. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.